Okay, with Nick Leahy, live from the Geneva is the short film. It's 13 minutes long. Really interesting film. It's this is a student project from Northwestern School.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, I filmed it my last year at Northwestern sometime in the fall. And
Is it your like thesis project, as they call it,
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah, it was. It was a project that I had written, I think, March of 2023, and then I had rewrote it a couple times. And then we eventually shot it in September of 20, no, not September, November of 2023. And we had like a 7th month post-production journey and had it show at Northwestern's Media Arts Grant premiere at in May of 2024. So yeah.
so what propelled you to want to do like a period piece set in the 1950s? That's kind of a bold idea, kind of a gutsy call for a thesis project.
Yeah, no, for sure. I wanted to do it because I was interested. I've always been interested in history, growing up when I was a kid, and I've been really fascinated about Cold War history and sort of especially the Red Scare. And I've been thinking a lot about sort of media misinformation and sort of what allows people to believe what they believe and where they read it online and so on and so forth, and made me connect that to the time period of the Red Scare where everyone was sort of told what to believe or accused of believing based on rumors and fear and propaganda. And I sort of tried to draw parallels to the fear and propaganda we sort of see from online misinformation and sort of like, you know, QAnon, sort of those misinformation communities,
Mhm.
and sort of try to make people relate to how that type of misinformation can damage people's lives and ruin people's reputations, even when it's not their fault at all. So I tried telling a story that um tried to resonate more with how we can realize, try to draw more, I guess, familiar tropes with how we react to misinformation today to see how people in the Red Scare reacted to it and try to draw sort of similar parallels to that.
Gotcha. And without the obviously after the war, the context is different because there was fear of people's literally fear of people's lives. There was a common enemy during World War II, right? And
Yeah,
then people get through that, they survive, and then Russia, the whole Russia kind of like Cold War kind of era begins. But it's like it's a different kind of context where like now obviously without the internet, without like there was like news people get newspapers in the morning, so their information comes from like the nightly news and the newspapers, where our information comes from a thousand different sources
yeah,
from. Yeah, and but you're right, emotionally we're humans, we're the same, I guess, from 70 years ago, but everything's
yeah.
different, but we're the same emotionally, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it was trying to, like, you're right. And I think it was trying to resonate with the time period of what we've learned about the Red Scare,
Yeah.
70 years later, and sort of how we've reacted to it as sort of this period where, especially like McCarthyism politics,
Yeah, it's black and white. We want black, good versus evil, right? Like
yeah,
it's yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
When there's more, that's actually why I decided to shoot it in black and white.
yeah.
Um, Not only because it's sort of like a film noir aesthetic and homage, but and why I chose to have the pocket square in color is because I wanted that world to be in black and white because that's how people saw things in the Red Scare. You're either communist or you're not.
Yeah,
So
you're communist and you're bad and you're evil and you're a capitalist
exactly.
or you're good and you're
You're
yeah. So
exactly.
and that's the thing now, right? Like now it's all about there's no nuance, right?
Yeah.
Like we haven't learned from the past. Like it's like there's no nuance. It's either like you're on this side or you're on that side, and if you're on this side, you're bad. If you like basically it's like even with wars, right? Like if you believe in these people, then you're a bad person. Then you know what I mean?
Exactly, yeah.
It's such an
That's why
interesting.
I had Yeah, that's why I had the pocket square in color throughout the film, is
Yeah.
because I wanted it to sort of symbolize this strong motif in a way that it sort of shines out in this world of black and white. And I wanted really to leave the audience to decide to interpret it as what it meant to them.
Yeah.
And when it gets burned at the end, it turns into part of the black and white environment because it becomes a symbol of it turned into the symbol of freedom and expression until ultimately when Johnny Heaters decides to burn it, it becomes part of the Red Scare era politics. It succumbs to the pressure of that
Mhm.
when Johnny decides to just give up on it. So yeah, I mean, I agree. It's like very, I think you were talking about earlier about um, sort of trying to figure out what's good and what's bad, and especially in a world where there seems to be a lot more nuance
Yeah.
and confusion as to like what these good things are and what these bad things are. Um, I didn't want to really give a definitive answer on like what my political opinions are because I didn't want to like put that on people, but I just wanted to
Well,
leave.
it would kind of defeat the purpose of the film too, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I kind of wanted to leave a little food for thought. I kind of wanted to voice a little bit of my sort of feelings about misinformation, but I wanted to do it in a way that sort of brings us together instead of sort of like tries to give a definitive stance that may be against one's own principles or way in which they, I guess, view a certain war out in the Middle East or view a certain political decision.
Mhm.
Um, just to sort of like put the idea in their head is like, hey, maybe I maybe the story resonated with me in a way where I could gain a new perspective on something that I had like a bias against. Like I can give like a hypothetical example. It's like, oh, I could see like a war out in the Middle East where I sided with one group, but then I realized that there's more nuance to it than I reasonably thought,
Yeah.
then I can maybe see it a different way. That's just like a hypothetical example, but it's something that I hopefully could guide people towards in a way, if that
So,
makes
but
any sense.
you're in an interesting generation. Obviously, you are aware that that basically there's a rail against your generation, especially at school, like meaning that you're like with lack of nuance, lack of of information, right? Where like that's sort of the narrative that's being told. Where like within the schools in the last few years. So it's I find it fascinating that you made this film. You're at a very hot spot school as well. Do you remember when you were when what kind of motivated you, kind of when you kind of came up with this idea, what motivated you to make this film?
Yeah, I think well, I wrote the first draft of this was called something very different. It was called the lapel, and originally the pocket square was supposed to be a lapel, but I tried to think more reasonably because I probably didn't have enough of a big budget
Yeah,
to go and buy a blazer with a red lapel. But I guess to answer your original question, what motivated me to make it was, I guess, sort of like what you had said earlier about like my generation and sort of being young and not have as access to as much information. I think a lot of my generation is sort of like, I guess I don't want to speak for everybody in my
sure, of
generation,
course, yeah,
but for me specifically, I felt like young people really want to have a voice towards, you know, the current, you know, societal and political current events going
yeah,
on in the world. And sometimes I think young people are sort of like told to, listen to the older people and sort of like told what to do in a sense and trying to learn in a sense. But I feel like young people have a lot of really good ideas, and I think I can also like bring new perspective
Sure, of course.
to current geopolitical tensions or
Yeah.
whatnot and so forth. I get it that like we're mostly in our 20s and sort of like still trying to figure our own lives out, but I think, you know, especially that came from my appreciation of history and what I've learned about. I grew up in DC, so I used to go to like all the different I went to the American History Museum a lot as a kid, and I would spend all my time there and I would go through like the
Mhm.
different museum exhibitions and just like spend hours there. And I just read as much as I can. So I think people really underestimate sort of the knowledge that young people have. I think it's a lot of maybe sometimes it's like, oh, you just graduated college, you're trying to get an entry level job, you know. It's sort of
Right.
like, I don't want to say like stay in your lane, but it's sort of like there's, it feels like sometimes that young people are sort of like, I don't know, sort of told to wait in the sidelines until maybe you're
Well,
30 or
I think
40.
it's this is a different topic, but I think you're the first generation to go through a major kind of cultural change and invention with the internet and with the iPhone and with the social media. So you're the frontline casualties of this
Yeah,
crazy that occurred, right? Where like there's so much things happening. You're the first person to have a computer in your like. So we're not our generations are not. We never experienced any of that, right? So there's going to be every major invention. There's always going to be huge lessons to learn, and I think that that's what's happening now. And it's like, and so we can't teach you because we never experienced it ourselves, right?
yeah,
And so you're really fascinating generation. You're going to be in the history books forever because it's like this is a crazy time, and you're the people on the front lines. And I think that this is what like thematically, this is what your film is about.
yeah, exactly. I think also, I mean, you mentioned social media, and I guess it's true in a way that a lot of young people's heads, or I don't want to say like young people,
No, I
like
mean we're
I'm
being
that
general,
person.
like it's a general
Yeah,
assessment. Yeah, that you're
yeah,
getting
but
your
it's
information
like,
on social media. Go ahead.
no, yeah, it's like a lot of us were growing up on social media. Like I had an Instagram account when I was like in fifth grade, so I
That's
must have been
crazy,
like,
right? Like, and it's
yeah,
like because your parents didn't,
I
right?
must have
I
been like
did.
11 years old. No, I begged my parents to like get me one because
Yeah,
all my friends had one before me.
exactly. Yeah,
And I was like, I don't want to miss out. And so I was like, I started experiencing that sort of social media, like first dipping my toes into social media when I was like 11 or so. And so now being almost 10, like 10 years later, it's kind of crazy that I don't know. It's weird because it's like I see it as sort of like, oh, it's just a part of growing up. But then I hear people that are older than me saying like, no, this is crazy that you grew up with something that you can
yeah.
have on your phone and you have access to.
It is
Um,
crazy, but yeah, go
yeah.
ahead. Yeah,
No, I heard someone say like, I don't know what's the point of going to like a high school reunion anymore. I can just look up what my high school people are doing on LinkedIn. You
yeah.
know what I mean? So it's like it's great. It's like the times are changing, I guess, in terms of
No, times changed. Times changed. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And it happened so fast, and like so. Your parents are like, yeah, go on. They they didn't know, right? And there's that pressure that all your friends are on it, so you have to be on it too, right? So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and your film is fascinating. I think that. So I just want to get to the filmmaking aspect of your
sure.
film. Really nice job, like as a nice direction, nice cast, nice performances. Just a really solid short film. You're a guy on the rise. I'd love to see what you do next. Just really nice. So everybody was a part of your film went to the school. Is
Yeah,
like
they did. Everyone involved, every member of the cast, every member of the crew was at the time, a current student at Northwestern. So it was a school Northwestern project through and through. And we used most of the locations we shot at were in Evanston. Um, we shot at the like the scenes where Richard's walking down the hallway and sort of the scene where Mr. Washington and Linda have an argument were shot in the Graduate Hotel, which is like right down the road from Northwestern.
Yeah.
And the dressing room shots were shot in Conn Auditorium, which is a theater at Northwestern where a lot of theater shows are done. So their dressing rooms were like really fitting of the time period, which was great. So it was great also getting to like location scout around campus and see what areas looked of the time and which didn't.
And obviously that your performances, like they have to be, they got to nail the tone and what you're feeling. Where did you find your lead actors for the film?
Yeah, I mean, we sent out a casting call to like local Northwestern theater boards and RTVF boards, and we had the whole audition process. And I worked with my casting director, Catherine Toohey, who sort of helped me figure out which ways to like characterize or just help me in the casting process as well. But that's how I found them. Yeah, just through Northwestern casting calls and doing an audition process and a callback process and yeah, just like viewing self-tape auditions and yeah.
Is filmmaking your thing? Is that what you want to do with your life?
I hope so, yes. I want to continue writing and directing. I also produce as well. So I produced a couple short films that I actually produced a film. I'll shout him out. Shane Chung, who I produced, co-produced his film Check Please. That's sort of a martial arts comedy about two Asian Americans, one Asian American and one Asian. They fight over the bill after a dinner, and it's sort of an homage to like the movies, the kung fu movies, like Drunken Master with Jackie Chan, if you've ever seen that.
Yeah.
Sort of like karate, old school style karate movies. And yeah, I hope I can keep doing that into the future. Right now I'm sort of working in freelance videography and photography just for, I live in Chicago right now, so
That was my next
local
question. Are you going to
clients.
stay in Chicago?
For the moment, yeah, I think so. I applied to grad school recently actually at Columbia and NYU, so if I get into either of those, I'll have to think about it. But for the moment, right now, I'm staying in Chicago.
And you said you're brought up in DC?
I grew up in DC, but I don't live there anymore. My
Yeah.
parents moved out to Long Island, so now I live in Chicago, but they live in Long Island.
Gotcha. And I'm Canadian, so I found it interesting that you played hockey growing up
I
because that's
did,
very
yeah. I didn't, yeah, I played up until high school, but I was a forward winger. I could play either side. And yeah, I played hockey since I was, I think, 10, and then I
wow.
played all throughout high school. And I'm a big Capitals fan, and I'm happy they're doing well this year.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You got your Stanley Cup finally, right? So
Yeah, I know it took forever. It was a lot of years of heartbreak, and then it finally happened, which was very happy. I went to the parade and everything,
oh
and
wow. So do you
yeah,
stay
it
with
was a
the
fun time.
Washington loyalties, even though your parents are in Long Island and you live in Chicago? Are the sports teams are all Washington sports teams will always be your
They
thing?
probably will. Yeah. I'm probably going to be a Caps fan until the day I die.
Okay.
And then I think the Nationals, um, I don't know, not growing up in Chicago, but I live close to
Baltimore?
Wrigley Field, and it's been fun to go to Cubs
Oh,
games.
gotcha. Yeah, okay. Yeah,
They may be a close second, but I think most of my loyalties will probably lie with DC sports teams, which
gotcha.
I'm okay with
Yeah,
because
well,
they
you got
seem
a quarterback finally, right? So, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I-
It's fun to watch him for the next 15 years.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. They're doing really well this year. I think they're gonna make the playoffs,
Oh, they
so
will. Yeah, I think that's a no-brainer. So what are you
yeah.
doing? What are you doing now? You're going to make another film? Like you said, you're going to go to grad school. This film's doing well in the festival circuit. It's getting some attention. We're talking now. Uh, is that so? Like I know you're distributing this film, but do you have an itch to make another film soon?
I do. I'm debating. I have something written right now that's sort of about hockey, like we talked about, and
Oh
sort of
wow,
like
okay.
trying to deal with themes of athletic obsession and pushing yourself beyond your limit and how it can affect your family members and so forth. And there's a sort of secondary arc I'm trying to plan out as well with that story. I don't know if I want to make it into a feature or if I just want to do another short film.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm writing that currently, and I don't know when I'm gonna be able to shoot it. It's still up in the air, but I'm currently trying to work on stuff in the meantime. Yeah.
Well, yeah, like I said, this is for like it's a nice direction in the film. It's like a nice sound design, just a nice solid film. I hope that you got an A for your efforts in school.
Thank you. That means a lot. I really appreciate it.
So I wish you the best. Like let's talk again when you make your next film, and I think you're on your way. I think that you the way you're talking, you talk through thematics and you talk through tones, and it's just that's very smart. Like it's a good sign that you know what you're doing. So.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
And
And
I hope I
thank
didn't
you
offend you
for
about the generational comments, like the conversation. So
yeah.
it's all good. But listen, I talk to professors all the time, and they say that your generation's extremely smart, and I do find it fascinating that you're overloaded with so much information, and nobody was there to teach you. Of course, you're in it, so you don't understand the context, but I think that there's a great story in there as well someday. So, but I think that what you just did here is amazing. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And
All right, let's talk
thank
again
you for
soon.
having me. We'll do. All right.